righty then. Well, it is now nearly time for me to go into town, I think. What time is it anyway here? Can I get my phone to... I can't get the thing to come up. But, oh, wait a minute. There it goes. Okay. Oh, come on. Okay, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. There we go. This phone's acting up. But anyway, I was thinking about something. I was thinking about something today. A story my Grandpa Fournier told me. My Grandpa Fournier, my dad's dad, was born in 1919, so he was a child in the 1920s. And he used to tell me, he told me different things about life back then, you know. One of the things that he told me he remembered from the 1920s, and he didn't agree with this, I want to be clear about this. He thought it was a damn dirty trick that people would do this. But it is something that people would do, and he remembered it. What they used to do is, you know how when you're going down the road sometimes you get a dog chasing your car? Doesn't happen as often now as it used to because most people keep their dogs pretty well chained up in their yards. But years ago, even when I was a young guy, it wasn't uncommon for a dog to just be running around loose on a property and, you know, to go out onto the road and chase cars and so on. God help you if you were riding a bicycle. You know, I had that experience a few times, and I also had my car chased more than once, you know, when I was young. But anyway, back, you know, the tires had the wooden spokes in the rims back in the 20s, you know, they were wooden spoke tires. And I remember my grandpa would talk about how the spokes would dry out and start to creak. It'd make a creaking sound, and people would drive the car into water. They'd drive it into a creek or a shallow river or whatever in order to get the spokes wet, in order to get them to swell up again so they weren't creaking. But anyway, one thing people used to do, though, is they'd tie a rag onto one of those spokes on like one of the rear tires of the car. And when the dog would run up, chasing the car, the dog would grab that rag, and of course the wheel would be spinning, and to break the dog's neck is what it would do. It would kill the dog, you know. And this is something people used to do. He remembered people doing that. Now, he said he didn't approve of it. He thought it was a dirty trick, you know, and he didn't approve of cruelty like that. But it is something he remembered people doing. Now, where I'm going with this is this. Right now, our politicians in Canada are on this big kick that they're going to, you know, put nuclear weapons at the border and point them at the United States, that they're going to cut off the power. I think that Doug Ford has backed off on that now, but he was going on about that, how he cut the power to the United States with a smile on his face and all that, you know, because we supply power to some households in the United States. And he was talking about doing that. Well, you know, those things are acts of war. What these politicians are doing is similar to what the dog chasing the car and grabbing the rag with its mouth was doing back in the 20s, you know? And it didn't end well for the dog when the dog would do that. And, you know, another analogy I would make would be, you know, that little dust mop looking dog at the park, that tiny little thing that looks like something that should have a stick coming out of its back so you can, you know, dust the floor with it or whatever. One of those dogs, and you know, you'll see one of those dogs and it'll be running circles around the German Shepherd and looking up at it and barking, you know, challenging the German Shepherd. You know, and the German Shepherd could just pick that little dog up with its teeth there and give it a couple of shakes and drop its dead body back down on the pavement. Like, you know, and but that little dog, you know, he thinks he can win. Just like the dog chasing the car thinks that there's going to be a good outcome to doing that. And that's what our politicians are like here now. It's weird, but they're that stupid. You know, they're going to challenge, they're a little dust mop dog, and they're going to challenge the German Shepherd, and they think they're going to win. Now, again, what I think has happened is our politicians in this country have promoted every form of corruption. They're anti-God. They're anti-even morals. Never mind God, but even if you don't believe in God, most people, if they're decent people, even if they don't believe in God, they have some moral code that they live by. You know, there's certain things that they just wouldn't do. You know, they'll have respect for marriage, so they wouldn't have an affair. They have respect for people's property, so they wouldn't steal, and so on. You know, they say that belongs to that guy. That's not mine. I won't take that. It's not mine, you know. That's that guy's hard-earned money. I won't take that from him unless I've earned it or unless I'm owed it for some reason, you know, or whatever it is. And I know atheist people like that. The couple I work for on a neighboring property here, they're atheist, but they're very honest. I mean, they would never steal from you. They'd never do anything to hurt you, you know, because they still have a moral code, even though they're atheist. But these people we have in power here, they're not, there's something different about them, you know. They don't believe in the God of the Bible, and personally, I think they worship the other guy. I think that they worship you know, I think they worship the other guy, you know, the pointy pitchfork with the horns, and you know, I don't really think he looks like that, by the way, the devil. And in fact, I could tell you a story about an encounter I had one time where I believe I even met the devil once. But I've met him in the form of certain people for sure, but I think I actually met the devil himself once in my life. But that's another story. And again, that was up in that same building there in the Royal Bank building where I used to live in Perth. But anyway, the bottom line is this. Maybe I'll tell that story in a video. I don't know if I've ever told it here before. I may not have, but I may tell it at some point. But anyway, the bottom line is this. I believe that our politicians are in league with that guy. You know, I think they're in league with Satan, basically. And I think what's happened is they've been given over to a reprobate mind. You know, they've been put into a state of disapproval, as the Bible says, or given over to a reprobate mind. And what happens is when you get eaten up with corruption to a certain degree, when you get eaten up with corruption, then you end up that logic and reason are no longer a thing. And I believe that's happened with our politicians. I believe the ability just to think logically and to reason things out, they just don't have it, you know, and that's why we're seeing all this crazy stuff up here. And it's too bad, but, you know, the bottom line is that, you know, talking about putting nuclear weapons on the border, only Chrystia Freeland could think of such a stupid thing, and it is stupid. It's actually a declaration of war, is what it is, which is not a good thing. You know, and the same with cutting the power and all that. You know, that's a life and death thing. You cut the power and people will die. Look, even back here, I'm not connected to the grid back here. This camper does not have any lines coming into it from the road or whatever, delivering power to it. There's nothing like that back here. But even I have a power generator and a box there, a battery box, and I have a propane heater that doesn't require any electricity to run. It just requires a tank of propane. If I didn't have those things, if I didn't have the propane heater or some sort of a heater, I'd be dead. I couldn't survive in here without some sort of heat. And even with the electricity, you know, there are certain things that I do need electricity for. I could probably live without the electricity if I absolutely have to, if I had to, but life would be a lot harder. I wouldn't have this phone, I'll tell you that, because how would I recharge it? So the phone I'm making these videos with wouldn't exist. You know, and there's other things too. I mean, so really, I'm fortunate that I have electricity. I mean, I could, I suppose, function back here with coal oil lanterns and candles. Hopefully I wouldn't burn the place to the ground. But hopefully Rocky wouldn't knock something over and set the place on fire or whatever, or I wouldn't knock something over. I'm kind of clumsy and there's not a lot of room in here. So I turn around sideways and I'm knocking stuff over in here. You people have seen it watching my videos, how I go to maneuver through here and I'm knocking things on the floor and everything. So I mean, there's a better than average chance I'd burn the place to the ground if I was using coal oil lanterns and candles to heat it or to light it. And so, like I say, but even back here in this situation, I have the ability to generate electricity and I have the ability to store electricity in my little power bank things that I have here, these things, and also in my power box over there, which was bought for me by a really good friend of mine. I only had that as of last year. Prior to that, I was just using these. And I was taking these up and plugging them into the house because the property owner had graciously allowed me to recharge my power banks at the house. But yeah, if not for that, I wouldn't have had any electricity back here. So anyway, the bottom line is, if you cut off the people's electricity and then their heat goes out because their furnace blower won't work anymore or whatever, or their and medical devices no longer work and so on, then you're going to have people dying. And if you cause the deaths of foreign citizens of another country, through your actions, then it ceases to be a trade sanction and a trade war, and it becomes a military action at that point. And so that's just something to think about anyway. I mean, but like I say, I was thinking of that though, about the story with the dog grabbing onto the rag tied to the tire. And again, I want to be clear, my grandpa made it clear he did not think that was a good thing. He thought it was a damn dirty trick. So he wasn't endorsing that when he told me the story. He was just telling me this is something that used to happen. This is something people would do. And he remembered when he was a little boy, people doing that, But anyway, the dog grabbing onto the rag because it doesn't know any better. It actually thinks it's won because it's caught the car, So the dog thinks it's won. But what has it won? It's won a broken neck, is what it's won. It's won its own end. It's won its own death. The same with the dog running circles around the German Shepherd, the little dust mop dog, and it thinks it's going to beat the German Shepherd. It's not going to happen. All it's doing is asking the German Shepherd to kill it. So that's the bottom line anyway. But it thinks it's going to win. It's delusional. Now, I mean, that's a dog. We don't expect the dog. We don't expect much out of a little dog. We understand that a little dog just is what it is. I would think that people, especially people in a high position of power, should have more intelligence about them than the people that we've got right now, though. And whatever you think of Trump and whatever you think of the United States, it's hard not to acknowledge that it's a foolhardy thing to threaten a superpower by saying we're going to start pointing nuclear weapons at you, or we're going to start we're going to cut off your electricity, and then some of your people are going to die. As soon as you do that, you're taking it to another level. You're escalating it where it goes beyond an economic dispute, and it becomes a military dispute. Anyway, that's it. There's Rocky. Oh, look at him there. He's pretty cute. You're very cute, Rocky. Hey, I wondered if that was fresh blood, but it's not. There's blood on the thing there. Hey, you. Sometimes his leg bleeds. That's why I wondered. This is the patented Camp Crazy Rocky cam. I don't know what you can see right now, so I'm moving the camera around. He's looking at me. He said, I'm under surveillance. Yes, you are. You're under surveillance. we're trying to make a case against you for being excessively cute. That's what we're doing. We're making a case against you, Rocky. We're building a case, gathering evidence of your cuteness. We are. That's right. You are hereby charged with being excessively adorable. What do you think of that? Hey, how do you plead? If I was you, I'd plead guilty. You're not going to win if you plead not guilty, because the evidence of your adorableness is overwhelming. Yes, it is. Anyway, that's it for now. Rocky and I are just hanging out here. I'm getting ready to go into town. And when I go into town, I'll upload all these pearls of wisdom and assorted hijinks and funny stuff that happens here at Camp Crazy. I will. I know some people will watch this and say, pearls of wisdom, you say, really? Well, I think they are. But I understand not everybody's going to agree with me, and that's all right. People don't have to. But I think you'll be hard-pressed not to agree with me, though, that Rocky's adorable. Whatever you think of my political point of view, you have a hard time arguing with me about Rocky. You will. Look at him. How could you say he's not adorable? Yeah. Eh? My goodness, eh? You're very sweet. That's it. We'll talk to you all later anyway. Here we go now. Look at him. Eh? He's wonderful. Bye for now.